Good morning, everyone. You're listening to Arwen Lewis on the Arwen Lewis radio show. And my very special guest here, if you're just tuning in, is Katie Cole. And she is a songwriter and a multi instrumentalist, touring musician. And you just heard her song, I'm Gonna Love You. And we're going to be featuring in its entirety her song Young and Stupid at the end of the show. So stay tuned. And we're going to come back into our conversation and talk about the world of performing. We talked about recording and all of your experiences with people you've worked with in the past and currently. But what do you really enjoy about performing live, and how do you want your audience to feel, Katie?
I've always enjoyed performing live. I mean, it used to terrify me when I first started when I was quite young. I used to perform and like my sister went to like a music school for a couple of years. And so she had concerts at her school and like I'd show up and sing like some background vocals on like her songs and stuff. I remember we sang like More Than Words and
I
just
love
just
it.
like it's such a funny thing to think, oh, that's where things started, but it all makes sense when you try and connect the dots. If you see it from its initial inception, you go, okay, that makes sense. But I love the fact that a good performance, I can I can sort of connect you to a bunch of strangers. It can also make a bunch of strangers feel like they're understood. I think that's part of why I'm a songwriter too, because I like to tell some of the more difficult stories that people might be sort of skimming over in terms of human existence, because it's not all sunshine and rainbows. you know,
Yeah,
you're like
kind of.
you're like really, oh, bummer. But it's a hard sort of humanity and being a human is difficult. But those moments where you can listen to a song and you can just kind of go, the world the world around me, the stresses around me don't exist. I'm just having this moment. And great songs can make you sort of feel like you're escaping from the situation, and they can also in different ways make you feel like you're completely understood and that that person has written that song to tell your story or help you sort of, I don't know, have a experience or have some sort of therapy in a way. It's whatever it is. But like I love performing for the reason of like I can actually have connections with people. I can talk to the audience, smaller intimate crowds. I have conversations, I tell stories. I tell stories about sometimes the songs that I've written. Sometimes I tell stories about whatever's happened that day, that week, that month that is interesting to me for whatever reason. I like to kind of make it a personal sort of journey so that it's not like an artist up there just going like, I am talking at you. I make eye contact with people. I, you know, wave my hands around a lot, even if I'm holding a guitar. I'll still I'm very animated, I suppose. But I like to sort of make sure I've got a connection with the audience. And sometimes those connections are made through the stories that you tell before the song starts. And you've told a story, you've broken down a few barriers, and then you play a song, and then all of a sudden people are really listening. Like they're really listening. And
And it
sometimes
creates
it's
like a church element, right? Like, I
yes,
mean,
yes,
and I think that was kind of, the way things started, like in the folk movement that I keep going back to, or for rock and roll, like in the 60s, and that moved into, for the music that I love anyway, I think, it's much more, um, it makes the artist able to last longer when there's a conversation rather than them just talking at you and throwing something at you. Like what's really the point of that? I
yeah.
feel like that narrows down the experience for everybody. And that all really comes through in your music. I feel like you tell the truth and tell stories, whether they're personal or just a story to, connect to the listener. And it really comes across musically too, because you get lost in your music. And then the words are just this other element that um, take the listener to the next level. So I really appreciate that and want to thank you for, sharing your gift with everybody.
Oh, thank you. It's very, very sweet of you. I really think that there's two sides to the song. There's the song itself in its recorded form, and as you said, you listen to it and you have this experience, and you're like, you it's like sometimes you can hear a song for the first time and not know who the artist is, and you wonder what they look like, and you see all these things. It's like reading a book. You sort of create your own version of whatever the story is, and you know, it's colorful and it's this picture and that picture and this happens and that happens and I feel this way. And then sometimes you can see somebody perform live and you don't really understand any of the words. You don't understand anything that's going on really. You just know that something in this music is special to you. And I don't know. I just think music is a different it's a different connector. It's a different creative art in the sense that it can hit you sonically in ways that other art doesn't. Um, it just has its own it has its own component to it in that respect. It can just go in without, it can go in there in your subconscious without you even knowing, and then you're like, oh, it's like you hear a song that you haven't heard in ages, and all of a sudden this memory comes back of this thing that happened, or these people that you're with, or whatever was happening at the time. It just comes back in an instant, and you're like, okay, they're little mini time machines also, which is really an interesting thing. Like the right song and the right moment can just basically capture, yeah, can capture sort of time. And I think that's why if you can connect to an audience at a certain time and you really have a real connection with them, I mean, very often those people are really fans for life because they
Yeah.
just, you can't let go of that. That was real to them and it's still real. Like that time machine I was talking about. I know I'm not, we're not talking about sci-fi here, but when when a song is sort of encapsulated in your subconscious, I feel like time stops, and that every time you hear that song, you are that person at that age again. You are whatever was happening then, but you're also that person that's happening now. And I don't know, it defies this, small world that we're told that we live in. It just, things become bigger.
Yeah, it creates more opportunity, and then I mean, and it creates an escape. Or if you need
Yeah.
to, get away from whatever you're doing, you just turn that song on, and there you are. You've been
Yeah.
healed a lot of the time. Um, and we have about a couple minutes before we head out to the next break. But do you see your music evolving in a certain way for your next project? Are you recording anything new, or are you focusing on promoting Rivers and Roads right now?
Oh, I'm working on new music still. I still have a couple of songs to release technically from that project outside of the EP, as it was kind of a bonus dealio. But I'm always working on something. I'm always writing. I'm always chipping away. I just pulled out a list. I just started writing a list of songs that I had in folders and folders. I'm always looking at which is the right, like which are the right group of songs to work on right now.
Mhm.
And sometimes it's the newer ones that you've just written, and sometimes you'll find something from 5 or 6 years ago, and you're like, that just needs a rewrite here, here, and here. And that is exactly what I'm going through right now. I'm always working on something, though. I don't think that cupboard ever closes. It's always kind of creaky and ajar.
Well, and it's cool when you come back to a song that you wrote 5 years ago with a more experience and more knowledge just from being alive on the road and being a musician. And then you can bring like you almost make it retro or something by bringing it back to life and re-recording it. And I can't wait to hear what you're going to come up with next.
Yay.
Uh, so for now, we're going to take you out to break with Katie Cole's song One More Time. And you're listening to Arwen Lewis on the Arwen Lewis Radio Show. My very special guest here today is musician and songwriter Katie Cole. And you're going to hear One More Time, and we'll bring you back in with maybe Memphis. Thanks for listening. Cool. So how? Okay. Cool. We'll wrap up in like 3 or 4 minutes.
Yep.
5 minutes?
All right. I'm still putting the songs in, and of course I'm seeing the time and so forth. So if it comes up where, okay, in 2 minutes or what have you, I'll let you know. But
Okay.
we'll look at 5 minutes.
5 minutes. Okay. So we'll wrap up with a 5 minute quick, or I guess we'll talk for 4, and then I'll do the outro.
Yep.
Let's find, is there anything you want me to ask you, or do you want to just talk about Young and Stupid and
Yeah.
inspirations by it?
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
Cool.
We could actually have a sequel to that called Old and Stupid.
Old and smart.
Yeah.
No, not necessarily. Getting older does not necessarily mean people getting smarter.
All right. Old and less stupid.
Yes.
Okay, all right, I'll go with that. She's the
Yeah.
songwriter. Leave it to her. Leave it to her. I should leave it alone. Okay.
He was not referring to you, by the way. He was referring to himself. I was like, wait a minute.
No.
I would have thought that.
I'll be on a blacklist and never be able to get into Australia. All right, here we. I'll have to become one of Keith Urban's roadies.
No.
All right, here we go. It's in 3, 2.
Good morning, everybody. You're listening to the Arwen Lewis radio show. My very special guest is musician and songwriter Katie Cole, and we're here talking about her extensive career as a touring musician and a songwriter and her life in music. She's recently released a project called Rivers and Roads, and we're going to be talking about her single that we're going to feature today in its entirety, called Young and Stupid. And so, Katie, where did the inspiration from the song come from, or did you have a lot of fun with it? What are your feelings towards it, and what was the recording process like?
Well, I wrote it definitely. It's definitely a personal experience song, and I sort of just elaborated on that. It took quite a few rewrites to get the story where I really wanted it to be. Just because when you do think back on youth, there's a certain element of fantasy. Like you can look back on things and you're like, everything was great then. And then you actually remember and you're like, no, things were terrible then. And everything was difficult and everything hurt all the time. And you were tired and you had no money and you did this, 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 this. And you're doing all these things you don't want to do. You don't know who you are, but you still can say all those things and then still look back on it and go, yeah, but it was kind of great.
Yeah.
Like there's an inexplicable part of that that's still like everything is still through rose colored glasses in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
So I thought there's something magical about writing that story, and I needed to put enough fantasy in the lyric as well as the truth. And I sort of went down the sort of rabbit hole of putting as many sort of really colorful lyrics and psychedelic sort of references and really vivid imagery and just really specific and non-specific things right in the same sentence together, just to make it seem real. Like when you mention something, like for instance, I could say, you know, Arwen Lewis is a pretty girl, but if I said she's sitting there poised with her hair in a tight bun, half a smile on her face, what is she thinking about? Like as a songwriter, when you think in those terms, I've not only described you in a better sense, but I've said I've made the listener go, I want to know more. Like what else? What is she thinking about? Like what's she smiling about? So as a songwriter, you have to put all the things in, but you also have to leave enough mystery that the listener can fill in gaps themselves and go, that's also me. So that was the process of like getting to the point of rewriting it till I was just like, okay, it's now done. Okay, now it's like, now the work really starts. And then the recording process was me, again, doing pre-production and going, where does this really need to go, and fleshing it out in every capacity possible so that musicians could basically come in and do their job. And I still kept some of my parts in there, of like Moog keyboard parts and some spacey sounds here and there, but I had great musicians come and play on the record and just elaborate on I know if I listened to my demo I'd be like, oh god, that's terrible, but you can hear all the parts are still there. It's not like they're not absent from the project, but I'm really proud of it. I think it really evolved into exactly where I really wanted it to go when I paired it with a video that I made with a good friend of mine, Chelsea Thompson from Dire Image. She's a really creative girl who is also a singer-songwriter, but she's a makeup artist and she does photography and videos. And I told her the sort of synopsis of what I sort of really wanted to sort of capture in a video, and I just wanted the whole thing to feel sort of lonely.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the time you look at young people who are beautiful and this and that, and you're just like, oh, it's perfect. But a lot of the time, when young people, as you know, like we've all been young, there's a lot of loneliness. There's a lot of trying to fit in. There's a lot of, when do I get to that feeling where I'm going to actually belong? And reality is, it doesn't really happen ever. You just learn to go, I just care less about what people, I just try to care less about what people think. And it's not just, I don't try and internalize things as much as I used to. Like I try and have, conversations rather than just keep all my thoughts to myself. But it's, I just tried to, that's my experience of things.
Well, just talking to you and getting to listen to your music has really taught that lesson, I think, even with this little interview today. So thank you so much for sharing your expertise and your music and your art with us and the world. Once again, you're listening to Katie Cole on the Arwen Lewis radio show. We're going to take you out with her song that she just told you all about, called Young and Stupid. Thanks for listening. And Katie, thank you so much for spending some time and talking about your career in music and songwriting with me.
Thank you so much for having me. And this was really great, really wonderful questions too. I really enjoyed this. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Clear. That was fantastic.
Thank you so much, Katie.
Yay.
It was
Yay. Thank you.
Talented and brilliant.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. But just great questions too. Just sometimes it's like, yeah, sometimes the question is really short and it doesn't encapsulate anything else. And I just have to kind of just waffle on about something. But you ask really good questions. So I appreciate that.
Oh. Well, I learned a lot just from about being a musician talking to you. So thank you. I liked it. It was great.
Well, thank you. Enjoy the rest of your day and let me know if you need anything else from me and my end, or if there's anything else I need to do or whatever. But I assume just send me a link and I'll share stuff once it's out there and uploaded and whatever. And if there's anything I can do to promote anything, I will, share on my socials and all that good stuff too.
Thank you. Yeah, well, we get the link done within a couple hours here, so I'll send the podcast right away, and then when's it airing? Okay, so tomorrow morning Pacific time, 7 to 8. If people in LA and Santa Barbara who want to listen, but I'll send all that information in the text I give you or the email I give you with the podcast link.
Okay,
and
great.
Then it'll air on the radio too.
Okay,
And then it
awesome.
also and it does air in, of course, New York, Connecticut, Boston, and the UK as well. So
Okay,
LA.
great. Awesome.
thank
All right. Thank you. Thank you. Take care. And thanks to your whole team as well. Appreciate it.
Have a beautiful day.
You too. All right, bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Mm. That was good.
That was awesome.
Cool.
Good job.
Thanks. I
Show
I was kind of intimidated by her because I was like, oh shit.
I would be intimidated.
Yeah, she's like,
She's but really, you got really a good interview out of it.
I think so.
Like really in depth and yeah, it's great. So good job.
Cool.
I like the background. The only difference, the only change that I would make is I don't think I'd have it so far over to the one side.
Yeah.
I'd have it more centered.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean think about fonts and anything